What up, y'all? This is Alex Clark-Youngblood. On today's episode, we have my very good friend, Hunter Brinkmann. Hunter and I have known each other since kindergarten. We really became best friends in late elementary school, 4th and 5th grade, and we were virtually inseparable all through our childhood and adolescence through high school. We ended up going our separate ways in college, which was kind of a dramatic story that we get into here in the interview, but I will always consider this man a brother. This is the first person, non-family member of mine who I considered a family member. I love him like a family member. I love him like a brother, and I always will. And those are the people I'm going to be interviewing, or the interviews I will be posting during these next several episodes are the non-family members of mine who I consider to be family, that I love like family. I'm just moving chronologically through my life, interviewing the people I love, starting with, my mom and dad and siblings, and now I'm getting into my best friends throughout life and the people that I care about very deeply. And I'm just trying to move chronologically through my life with these interviews. I recorded this interview and most of these interviews back in 2018 when I went on a podcast interview tour when I was kind of launching this project. I left my job and apartment I had in DC and just embarked on a little tour across the country. Went from DC to Chicago, back home to Atlanta, off to Louisiana, where my dad's side of my family is from, and then I went back to Atlanta to record this interview with Hunter. We recorded this interview actually in my mom's basement in Atlanta, a place where Hunter and I spent a bunch of time together throughout our childhood. And then from there, I went up the East Coast. And so after this Hunter interview over the next several weeks is me moving up the East Coast, interviewing friends of mine that live dotted along the East Coast up through the Carolinas and all the way up the East Coast to Maine, actually. So yeah, these next several interviews, starting with Hunter, will be non-family members for the first time. My closest friends. So, real quick, point of clarification. At some point I referenced the Youngblood University. I referenced the name of the podcast as Youngblood University. When I was first recording these interviews, I thought that was going to be the name of the podcast, Youngblood University. And I talk about how I like the acronym YU, as if it, asking that as a question, YU, ? Youngblood University, YU. But ultimately, I overthought it and went with Alex Clark-Youngblood. It just seemed like the simplest name for the podcast. Youngblood University, I was concerned might have some sort of higher education context, or might be associated with college sports. I was probably thinking about it too much, but just went with the Alex Clark-Youngblood podcast ultimately. But when you hear me reference Youngblood University, that's what I'm referring to. I was toying around with that name for a minute. Anyway, here's Hunter.
This is I want it that way. Tell me why ain't nothing but
That's good. You're good.
Just like that?
Yeah, it's on high. You can just talk normal. You'll be fine. There's no background noise here. All right. Hunter Brinkmann. Let's start with your life story. Just tell us just give us a backstory. Where are you from? Where were you born? When were you born?
You're recording?
Yeah.
So I was born in New Orleans. When I was 2, my dad took a job in Boston with a company called Broderbund. And then we moved there, and I was there for 2 years. I have very few memories of Boston. From there, we moved to Atlanta when I was 4 years old, where I've lived ever since then, right up to the present day at age 30. Backstory beyond that, I had a really great childhood with my family and friends, including yourself, which was really great. I feel like it shaped me as a person that I am currently.
Where did you grow up? Describe where you grew up.
Grew up in an idyllic community called Roswell, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta.
Do you remember how old you were when you all moved here from Boston?
4.
Okay.
Yeah, so lived here for 26 years, and then when I was 18 years old, moved from Roswell into the city of Atlanta for college at Georgia Tech, and I've lived here ever since then.
And then we met each other we're in Miss Roebuck's class in kindergarten, right? That's when we first met each other?
Yes.
Okay.
But we weren't really
close friends to like 4th or 5th grade?
I think I would say that we became really close friends in 5th grade when we both played. This is my interpretation of events, but I would say we became really close friends in 5th grade when we played select soccer together on Coach Diego's team.
Yeah, I remember us being friends. I remember you being in my kindergarten class, but we weren't like good friends 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. My closest friend back then was a guy named Patrick, but that was just because he lived in my street. And then, 4th grade, I remember sitting next to you in Miss, whatever the honors language arts classes we were in. I remember sitting next to you. I remember that being, like, black lady. She had, like, braids.
Oh, Miss Onuma's.
Onuma, yeah. I remember we sat next to each other there and being like, oh, okay, this relationship's probably going somewhere. But then, we really became good friends when we both made the select soccer team, because that became, like, our lives. And we're going to get into that in a second. Before we get into that, tell us about your family. What's your family structure?
My family structure is I'm the oldest of 4. We're all about 5 years apart. I have 2 younger brothers and a sister, and we're 14 years apart, almost 15. And 2 heterosexual parents, Brian and Sherry. So very... I don't know how you'd say it, like very stereotypical kind of nuclear family, very Catholic with 4 unplanned children. So that's why we're all about 5 years apart. That's the structure. My dad worked, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom who cooked and cleaned and ran the household. And again, I guess running theme for me would be like very idyllic childhood. 2 great parents and
the only thing like that always struck me about your family structures, that it was so crazy to me that your sister was born when we were in high school.
That was crazy for me too. It's funny because I always tell, like, when people talk about like, oh, having kids or anything, or as like, I feel like I kind of, in a weird sense, almost like went through it as like being 15 and having like an infant in the house. You had a like room right next to mine. It was like when people like, oh, I don't sleep at all, and I like think back to it, like I didn't really think anything of it at the time, but being like 15 and never sleeping because I was like wake up in the middle of the night every night with like a crying baby. So that was very strange to have a sibling that far apart.
Yeah, I remember that it was weird. It was cool because it was a unique experience. Like, none of my other friends were having like infants in their house when we were, starting to like date girls. But
which didn't happen like that.
We'll get into that too.
This is revisionist history of
when I was scoring touchdowns. Your baby sister cheering me on from the stand.
Yeah, I remember that. Those were the good days.
I can remember seeing her when those that are carrying me off the field on their shoulders.
Yeah, they never did that before for anyone. I remember that.
All right, so then let's get into like when we started being good friends. You alluded to earlier. It was right around 5th grade. It was the end of 5th grade, really. But we were good friends in 5th grade before like the whole soccer thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I feel like that was the first time when we had all the classes together.
Yeah, 5th grade year.
Was when we were doing like tag, and then we had like each one of those, like Mr. Irving's class and the Smith's class.
Yeah, we were switching. Yeah. Because we were smart kids. We were. We'll get into that too. We were sharp kids in elementary school.
You don't want to shoot all your powder here. Everything's like later in the...
No, but it gets into some stuff I want to talk about later. But yeah, we were sharp kids academically. In elementary school, you reference TAG, the Talented and Gifted program, and it's not just to toot our own horn here, but it's also, that was, I think, our initial bonding experience because we were in all the same classes together. And then 5th grade, when the advanced kids would switch to classes like for each subject area, and then we had the gifted program together. But then the end of 5th grade, we tried out for like the traveling select soccer team.
Yeah, that would have been in the summer. Like
I remember the very end of 5th grade.
No. fifth grade we played select soccer, so that would have been in the summer that we tried out, like after fourth grade, and then we did select soccer all through fifth grade.
Did we?
Yeah.
Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
I thought I remembered us going to fifth grade graduation, like the day after we made the team. But maybe it was just the end of the year celebration for fourth grade.
I don't remember that, but I don't see how it could have been, because we did. Fifth grade was our first year on the team, and we had a fall and a spring season, so we were.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because I can also remember writing journal articles in fifth grade for language arts class about our soccer team and shit. Anyway, okay. So fifth grade then was when we really bonded, and then we were best friends all through middle school and high school. Like, you were my closest friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throughout that time, and socially, like academically, you maintained a pretty high performance throughout. My academic and athletic performance kind of slipped, and we'll get into that in a bit. And then socially, like, I guess, how would you characterize us socially throughout middle school, high school? We were cool kids, but I think we kind of had, like we weren't getting stuffed in the lockers. Yeah. And we had plenty of friends. It wasn't like there was anyone we weren't friends with. But we weren't, like, fucking the hottest chicks in school. Or fucking, period.
Yeah, we definitely were fucking at any point in that.
Yeah, I lost my virginity freshman year of right when I got to college. I remember being apprehensive, like, oh, I'm going to college a virgin. I feel like I'm kind of behind that ball here a little bit. So yeah, I think we were, the way I would classify it, I think we were, popular kids, but we weren't the captain of the football team.
We were just normal guys.
Just normal bros. How do you characterize, like, I also feel, looking back on our middle school and high school lives, I also feel like there was a very overt, like, contrarian streak. Like, we kind of made an effort not to follow the traditional social path. Like, I remember us always talking shit about, like, going to homecoming and going to prom, and it wasn't until senior year, I guess, that we all really went to prom. I don't know, I just felt like there was, like, this contrarian streak about us. Would you agree with that or not?
No, I would. I mean, I would say that's probably a little bit more of, like, if it was, maybe an easy thing for, like, if it was effortless, right, like, you would have gone, right, to homecoming or, like, something like that, or, like, you would have...
Yeah, I don't know, but that's why I want to get your perspective on it, because the way I look at it in hindsight was like, it was an option to, like, participate in social life like that in high school, but I remember looking back on it and being like, it almost being like a philosophical stance I was taking. And the same way with, like, the shit I used to wear to school and stuff. I used to wear, like, T-shirts from the thrift store and shit like that. I was never wearing, like, none of us were wearing, like, making too much of an effort to, like, fit in.
Yeah.
You just think you were fucking weird, like, not as cool as we... I think we were.
No, man. I don't even think... Like, the way, like, I... think about it, like, looking back on, like, us and having to place it was, like, I remember having, like, a really, really tight circle of friends.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't feel like other people had that or that kind of relationship. So I felt like it was easy for us to, like, fall back on each other almost, or like it's easy to not feel pressure to do any of those things, or to, like, or what am I trying to say? Like, I feel like it was, like, easy for us to do or not do those things or fall under that kind of pressure to do it because we had, like, each other to fall back on, kind of. Like, we were so close that it was easy to just be like, oh, fuck, it's like, I'm hanging out with Alex, or, like, we're...
Right.
Yeah,
that's true. There was never, like, a lack of social things to do. That's an excellent point. Like, there was... We always had each other. There was us. We were obviously very close. We always spent a shit ton of time together through soccer, not only in school, but after school because of soccer. But then we also had, probably like 5 other guys that we constantly hung out with. And so there was never like a lack. You were never lonely. There was never a lack of like someone to hang out with. There was never a lack of someone's house to go to. It wasn't like you had to go outside yourself or scramble to like find social interaction.
Yeah, I thought this podcast was going to be like you ask me questions about like current events, not like how we never got laid.
Maybe we'll get there. No, I want everyone's... The title of the podcast is Youngblood University, and the way I think about that is, there's a lot of ways I think about that, like why I wanted to call it Youngblood University. First off, I like the acronym YU, and I think about like YU and you throw a question mark on it. It's like why you, like you're being asked why you, like what does that mean? Why you? And I've become like increasingly libertarian over the past couple years, and I've increasingly placed less. I was raised very much by my mom to be self-sacrificing and altruistic no matter what. And that was the formation of my thinking in college. That was the formation of my thinking in my initial post-college years and the professional decisions I made. And in the last few years, I've gone away from that. But I'm still struggling with that because I feel like being more focused on myself, more focused on my development as a human being, placing a greater emphasis on individual responsibility, not only in the way I look at my life, but the way I look at like society at large. I'm struggling with that because it conflicts with the way I was raised, which is very much like communal and a large emphasis on self-sacrifice and doing things for other people, because that's the way my mom is. But I want to get people on this podcast back to the Youngblood University thing, not just that I like the fact that it's like the acronym being YU ? And it causes people to like focus on themselves, like, oh, why me? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why have I been gifted this time on earth? Also, I like the Youngblood University thing because I want to approach it like every person that comes on is like a teacher within themselves. I'm trained as a teacher. That's pretty much all I've done professionally. But I've gotten to a point in life where I'm like, dude, I have no idea what the fuck is going on anymore. I've reached this point as a 30-year-old where it's like, okay, I have some basic principles of life that I think I know are right and things I believe in, but I expected to know more or be like more confident about like how to live a good life or what direction to take in life. But at this point, I'm just throwing up my hands. I'm like, dude, I have no idea how to fucking live life, how to go about like adulthood, right? And so Youngblood University is like each person I bring on is like a professor at the university. So I want to get their basic backstory of life, and then I also want to get their perspective on life. And so us going into the backstory is just kind of to lay the foundation of who you are, and then slowly but surely I'm going to ease you into like reflections on our relationship, but then on life more broadly. Or because I have a ton of questions about like how to go about life, and so I'm bringing you on to like, Hunter, tell me how to live life, or like what's your perspective on how to live life, how to be a good person, how to go about this shit.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Well, we're about to find out. Right. But that's the other thing, dude. No, that's going to be another common thing about this, and something I've discovered as I've entered adulthood is that, dude, no one has the fucking answers. Like, no one knows what the fuck is going on here. We're in this spinning ball that's like flying through infinite outer space. And yes, there are people with maybe like certain experience and certain wisdom or certain knowledge in areas, but like no one knows what the fuck is going on. No one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. No one has any answers or direct, absolute definition for what direction we should take in our life or how we should go about our lives. We're all just kind of winging it here. So I want to get your perspective on how you're winging it each day. But let's get back a little bit more into the chronology of your life. So we're in high school now. We talked about soccer. I want to get into soccer for a second. Soccer was such a fucking huge part of our life growing up, man. Like,
it was.
We were good soccer players growing up. I guess we played at like the highest level, you would say, essentially, for what was there, more or less.
About it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a major part of our life and a huge time and effort commitment. Looking back on soccer, and we're talking about, during the clubs, it was 2 seasons. So club in the fall and then high school in the spring. Club in the fall was like 2 or 3 days a week practice and then games on the weekend. It got to the point where we were traveling to like, we grew up in suburban Atlanta, but we were traveling senior year of high school to like fucking South Carolina and North Carolina for games,
Yeah.
So it was a major commitment. Looking back on the whole soccer experience, how do you feel about it? Because I almost think like we went a little too hard. Like I don't like to like focus on regret. I think every decision you make and every experience you have, there's a lesson in it. But like if I had a time machine, I don't know if I'd devote that much attention to fucking playing soccer.
I guess I'm kind of the opposite. Like I would almost would have played it more.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like, so without going like too much into it, so we played when we were growing up, and I got to 5th, 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade playing soccer and everything on the traveling teams. And then when we got to the point of 8th grade, so I guess, common theme for this episode of your podcast, you were my best friend, and you were on the team in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, and that was when we were like hanging out constantly and everything, and it was like a thing where I got to go hang out with you. And then 8th grade was when you weren't on the team anymore, and it was just me on Peter's team, and they brought in all those kids who were like really, really good. And that season in 8th grade was just like horrible, and like I never played. I mean, I would literally play 5 minutes a game, I would say, and that's being like generous. So basically like not playing at all in the games and getting, bitched at constantly. And it says I have a missed call from Chevron.
I saw that.
And a voicemail.
I saw that pop up. I thought that was like, I don't know what the fuck it was.
Like your gas bill's out of control. So, where was I going with that? So
8th grade shit was
8th grade, never
intense.
played, and it was horrible, and it was like just a miserable experience. Like I wanted to quit, like didn't want to play anymore. And then so after that season, it was like, all right, I need to go to a different. Like I'm not even playing on this team. Like it's possible I would have gotten cut from Peter's team anyway. Mm-hmm. And I went and played for Manny's team up a year, and that was just
a
like
year older. You're playing in an older age group.
Yeah, and it was like that summer getting on that team was like, and I hadn't really like thought about it before, and it kind of took that like really shitty experience to be like, oh, I really like enjoy this thing, or like I'm really good at it and I love playing it. Mm-hmm. And it'd be like in the summer when we had those like first training sessions, just like going out there with like no stress. And like, I mean, it was a Classic 2 team, so it was down a level from where we were. And I felt like, I was like, oh, I'm the best guy on the team here. And it was like getting something back to me that like I really loved, and kind of like discovering for the first time that like I really enjoyed playing it, and I just had no stress doing it. And it was like from that point on, when I got there, just wanting to play all the time. Like that's all I wanted to do. When I got to like freshman year of high school, was like I just wanted to like play soccer all the time. And that was like, I mean, the thing I remember about it was like when Basse was on the team, because he joined when we were sophomores on Manny's team, when we moved up a division to Classic 1.
Yeah, Basse was a kid that we played with who was from Sierra Leone, right?
Yeah.
Ivory Coast? Yeah.
Yeah.
He was an immigrant from Sierra Leone. He's sick.
He lived in College Park.
Yeah,
so
tell that whole story real quick.
So you used to ride the MARTA all the way in the mornings
From
at like
inner city
5:30
Atlanta.
in the mornings from College Park all the way up to the last stop in the suburbs of not even North Atlanta, in Roswell or Sandy Springs. And then he would go to school there, and then he would...
Not even, dude, because the last stop doesn't take you to school, so what did he do?
Sandy Springs, yeah. They had the bus come and pick him up there, and then I'm pretty sure that's how it happened, and pick him up and bring them to Centennial.
So he'd have to take the train from inner city Atlanta up to the suburbs where we were, the train doesn't like drop you off in front of the school though. I guess then the school bus picked him up around the MARTA station.
I think that's how it worked.
Around the train station, and then took him from school. So school started at like 8:40?
Yeah, so he would get up at like 4:30 in the morning.
Jesus Christ.
And then take that, I think that's really early, whatever it was, and then take the train up to Sandy Springs, get picked up on a bus, basically like close to like a 2-hour commute maybe, like to and from. So he's playing on Manny's team, and Roswell is the club team where he practiced 2 days a week, and he would... when he joined the team on Tuesdays and Thursdays when we had practice, he would bring a change of clothes and come stay at our place, and then go from there to practice, and the next morning go to school with me, and then go home on that Wednesday and do it again Thursday.
And then during high school season, we had practice at 4? And we probably got out of there around, I don't know, 6:37?
Yeah.
And then
it was after 4. No, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like work hours, but yeah, that would have been like 4.
And then we'd have to drive him a lot of times back to MARTA.
To MARTA, yeah.
So we dropped him at MARTA like 7:30, and then he had 2-hour trip back down the fucking College Park, only to get up the next morning at 4:30 and do it all over again.
But what I remember about that and where I was going with this was that he, like, because he really loved soccer, right? I was like growing up in an African country, and we would like just like how like into it and just like obsessed with playing I was. I mean, he would come over to my place on Tuesday, and or Thursdays, and that was, my dad bought this was before the English Premier League now it's on NBC, but It was on like, he bought this like special channel to get it, and we would like come home and like watch English Premier League because the club team practices were at like 8:30 to 10.
Yeah.
And we would like watch English Premier League or play FIFA or go out to the Esther Jackson fields and play soccer and then go to practice after that. And I was just like
obsessed.
I just loved it. Like that's all I wanted to do was just play and like do it constantly.
Yeah. And you were good. Like you were really good. And like I said, we played once we started getting into high school, and especially like junior, senior year, when we were back on the same team. What was that, senior year for Norcross?
Yeah.
Yeah. We were playing at the highest level at that point. We were playing in what was called the Premier League or something. And that was like the highest level. You couldn't get any higher from a club standpoint for the fall season. And the high school season was in the spring. And our high school team was fucking stacked, I thought.
Yeah, we were good.
We were really good. Like, we could have, what did we lose, like the quarterfinals or something in the playoff senior year?
We lost the second round.
Whatever it was. But anyway, we could have competed. My point is, we were good. We were playing at the highest level that there was, and you were among, I would say, the best players, in the state in that top group.
Wow, I love it. This is like getting on the record here.
No, but it's true. Our high school team was sick, and you were one of the better players. And there was no higher level, so it wasn't like there was like a level of competition above that where you had to prove yourself. You were proving yourself at the with the best players.
Yeah, you could have played you could have done like the ODP stuff there, right, and been like on the like regional team, or
right.
Team,
but the gap between you and those guys wasn't substantial. It wasn't like those guys were blowing you off the field because we played against those.
No, yeah, sure.
My point was, so I was alluding to, so. You could have played in college somewhere. You maybe not D1 or like one of the top schools, but if you wanted to play at a smaller school, that probably would have been an option, right?
Yeah, I had some like just random small school offers. I didn't want to. I mean, I had like Hampton, Sydney in Virginia. It was like an all men's school of like 500 students. So it was like not appealing at all. I probably had like 2 or 3. Like I wouldn't even say they made me like formal offers. I had like coaches reaching out being like, do you have interest at like the lowest level of like college stuff? So I wouldn't say that would give you a reasonable gauge of like how good I was, right? Like there's no D1 schools like knocking on my door or anything like that.
Yeah, but you also didn't like pursue it. I don't even think it was ever any interest of you. I didn't even remember you ever discussing that as a possibility.
No, I wasn't. I think by the time probably like when you get like sophomore, junior year is probably the time you're starting to like seriously think about like, I'm going to try and play in college and send out like tapes of myself to schools or go do like tryouts or something like that. Like I was just like, I'm not going to do it in college.
Yeah, and I would say the majority of the kids on both our club team and the high school team, like the majority of the starting lineup probably was in like the same boat.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem like there was much interest from anybody.
I feel like everyone who went and played like
quit after the freshman
year.
year.
Like was just like, why am I doing?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like if people went and played at a D1 school, it's like, all right, you're kind of like the man on campus a little bit. Like, I'm an athlete at like a big school, like that maybe has like its own rewards, I can imagine. But I don't think, I feel like the level we were at was like not the super cream of the crop, because there's not that many D1 college soccer programs. Like none of us were good enough to go play at like Duke or something like that.
South Carolina.
Because those guys are all like in the feeder pool for the national team. But I feel like everyone who kind of continued and went to like
Elon or something.
No, that was D1. But same story though. But the guy went and played there, quit, right? It's like you go to these like tiny, even the D1 schools like Furman and Elon, like those guys all quit. Like it's like, why am I doing this? Like I guess you come to like a decision point of like, am I going pro, or it's like, why am I like, college athletics is like no joke at all, right? You're doing like practice in the morning, you're doing classes, then you're going to practice in the evening and doing fitness like all the time, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and that's something for kids, whoever's listening to this, if you're a father or a parent of a child or a child yourself, thinking about that in high school, like it's a commitment. From everything I've heard from anyone who ever went off and played, it's like you might be playing D2 college soccer, but your regimen is essentially the same as if you were playing fucking football at UGA or LSU.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It dominates your life.
Yeah.
And so you need to weigh that versus like what you want your college experience to be.
Yeah, if any kids are listening, you'll never go pro.
Stop you there. Stop that you there. Dude, I had that same, just a quick aside. So I taught PE this last year, and I taught high schoolers. I taught middle schoolers and high schoolers. And, there's so many, as a middle schooler, up until probably 8th grade, I thought I was going to go pro in some sport, right? I remember writing an essay in freshman year in Miss McCord's class in high school, and it was like this big fucking, like, emotional release for me to write this essay about how, like, I had come to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to be a professional athlete when I was a freshman in high school. But I had these students this past year, some of these kids, well, 6th, 7th, even 8th grade, I can kind of understand. Like, we talk with these kids and they'll say they want to play like pro basketball or whatever. But then I've got like 9th and 10th graders who are saying the same shit. I was so torn about it all year. Like, at what point do I need to intervene with these kids, or even is it even my responsibility to like pull this 10th grader aside and be like, listen, dude, you're not going to the fucking NBA. Like, you can't hit a fucking jumper. But I don't know. So Hunter did that for
Maybe
you.
you just pack him like every day and in class and just like, what are you going to do in the pros?
Listen, y'all, if you're in fucking high school out there and you're not like dunking from free throw line, you're not going anywhere. Give it up. No, I shouldn't say that, because I do think there's a certain value, and it goes back to what you were saying. Like, you wish you had dedicated more time to soccer, because that's the other side of the coin. I was saying I kind of wish I dedicated less time to soccer. But then the other side of the corner has been like, man, I wish I would know what I know. I had the discipline I do now as a 30-year-old, especially with like my physical fitness, to go back and dedicate more time, because I think we both had the ability
mine wasn't
to
like,
go somewhere with
not
that.
to like, mine wasn't like I wanted to do more time because I was like, I'm gonna go pro in this or anything. It was like, I think probably an essential ingredient to like being successful at any kind of, I guess, anything you want to do. It was like, I really just liked it. Like, I liked playing the game, so I was like, I want to play it more, not like this has some payoff for me at the end of the road.
Right.
I think that in and of itself like made me better at what I was doing, because you're just you like it and you're doing it all the time. But I think it wasn't like, I didn't have any point. I don't ever remember thinking like, I'm going pro in this. Like, I think the first time I like didn't make ODP, I was like, all right, I'm not that good. Or like, I'm not like that good as like those guys are. Like, those guys are insanely good. Like, I think I carried that with me like from age 12, was like, I'm not like the cream of the crop of these guys.
Right. Yeah, man, looking back on it, I never really enjoyed soccer that much, to be honest. Like, I liked playing in the games. I liked the physicality of it. I liked like the athletic competition, but the game of soccer itself, I never really enjoyed that much. And I was always focused on other sports. Like, I always really wanted to play football. That was the sport I really, really wanted to play. But honestly, every time that I would kind of go down the football road, what kept pulling me back in large part was our relationship and the relationship that we had with other kids that we played with. Like, those are my closest friends. And so it'd get to the point where, like, I'd start playing football in 8th grade, but then I knew you guys were all going out for a club, and I was missing the practices, and, like, I was missing all the talk about, like, the games, the upcoming week. It was more of a social thing, honestly, for me, the way I look back on it now. And if we hadn't been such close friends, I don't think I ever would have stuck with soccer as long as I did all the way through fucking senior high school. Because, dude, now I don't play soccer ever. I've probably played in the decade since we've graduated. How are we? 32? In the 12 years since we graduated high school, I've probably played an organized soccer game like 3 to 5 times, maybe. It's just, I don't like it. I never even liked it. However, a big reason I didn't like it, and I want to get into this next, was right around 5th and 6th grade, and we've talked about this in the past, and I've gotten to a little bit in past interviews. Right around 5th and 6th grade, I started developing horrible OCD, and that was right around the time I was saying that, you know, we were both successful academically and athletically, and we were maxing out. You know, we were performing at the highest levels, both academically and in soccer. But right around 7th grade, when the OCD really started taking over my mind, my performance, both academically and athletically, plummeted. And you referenced it earlier. That's
you
when
were really bad in school and at athletics. I remember that.
But Hunter referenced it earlier. It was like right on 8th grade, I didn't make the team. That was the first time I didn't make Peter's team. And it was, I don't want to like make excuses for myself, but and the same thing, I had to be in 7th grade. I had to be removed from the honors algebra class because I got like a C or a D in the class.
Yeah, they did that really ceremoniously, if I remember correctly. Like escorted you out of honors class after you'd already sat down.
Nah, but what was going on at the time, man, it was like my mom tells the stories, like I literally would just like sit there in class when we're like supposed to be taking notes, and I would write like the word, I don't know, fucking, you know, I'd write the one equation. And then she's going on with the rest of the lesson, and I'm just writing the same equation over and over and over and over and over and over, and then flipping the paper, writing the same equation over and over and over, because whatever was going in my head, I had to keep writing it over and over. And the same thing, like when we go to soccer practice, I can remember times when like your dad would come to pick us up for soccer practice, or your mom, and I'd be like, fuck. I'd have to start getting ready. Let's say your mom was coming to pick me up at 6. I'd have to start getting ready at 5. Just to like get my shit together, get my bag together, get my socks on, because it would take me, 20 minutes to do the right foot, 20 minutes to do the left foot, then I have to take them all off and do it all over. So I was fucked at that point, man. It was impossible for me to focus in class. It was impossible for me to focus on the soccer field, because then once you get to the soccer field, I'm thinking, oh fuck, I gotta redo. All I'm thinking about is, did I put all my shit on the right way? Did I perform the compulsions the right way? My point is, right around that time and all the way up through high school, that shit was going on constantly. These OCD symptoms constantly, up through 12th grade, into college. And you were the first person I ever like came out of the closet to, so to speak, with like about this mental illness I was experiencing. Before I ever said anything to my mom, although my mom noticed things throughout my adolescence, before I ever said anything to any of my family members, sisters, or any other of my friends, I can remember. It was when I helped you and Ryan, our other really good friend, move into Georgia Tech. And I was just hanging out. I was like spending the weekend with y'all in the dorms. It was like our last weekend before I was going to go off to school, to a different school. And I remember we were walking over through the Tech campus over to Georgia State to visit our friend Lenny, who was going to school over at Georgia State because he's not smart enough to get into a real university. And I remember saying, like, hey, there's something I need to talk to you about. And it was the first time ever in my life that I was like, dude, I've got a fucking problem, or I've had this big fucking problem. It's affecting me for the past decade. Like, I'm just laying it out there. I need to, like, say something about this. So that was the first time I've ever done that. What do you remember about not only that conversation, but did you have any idea as we were growing up together, middle through high school, that, like, I was experiencing some sort of mental something?
I would say that the only thing I remember was being like senior year probably, and either me or someone else joking, because you used to have to go back and check all your car locks individually and being like, oh, like Alex is so OCD, he has to do that, and it probably like picked up in volume with like once you notice one thing, I guess it was like having jokes about like he's so OCD, but not having like, you know, like knowing even what that means or anything really, other than like, oh, it's someone who has to like check a lock a million times.
Right.
And I remember what I remember when you told me was that I didn't have the like conceptual toolkit as a person at that point in my life as like an 18-year-old to like understand what that meant for you as a person.
Right.
I think that's what, like, looking back on that, and like I guess I've thought about it since that point, was like, or being like a more mature person and having like a wider range of experiences in my life with like other people, or just I guess it's kind of like the maybe like poverty of my own personal experience, like range of things I've known about other people, like you know, it was like when I was 18 years old, just like not understanding, like I got it and was like, I understood what you were telling me and was like, had empathy in that sense, but not in a real sense of, and not like I never could, but like not knowing what that would mean, or
right.
like what that feels like to deal with. So probably more like a certain amount of like glibness to it than you know, it was almost like you formalizing like a joke we would make. It was like, Alex is so OCD, and it's like, you're like, oh yeah, I am OCD, and it's like, yeah, no shit, like but not like knowing what that would mean for like a person day to day, or having
right.
like the proper amount of you know, like respect or empathy for like
right.
that I feel like I do now after having more experience in my life of like what that would mean
right.
for a person.
Yeah. No, I totally get you. Yeah, that was a big moment for me, man. And just having that conversation with you was super cathartic for me, because like I said, it was a turning point in the way I approached the illness, because of the first time I had not just like buried it inside. Because yeah, like the things, it was impossible for it to go totally unnoticed. But really, dude, for, you know, a decade, I did my best to keep it under wraps as much as I can, because it dominated my life every second of every day.
Yeah.
I can remember every night just walking up and down these stairs hundreds of times to like 4 a.m. every night. Because I just had to or whatever. I remember having to like go back to coming home, dropping you off from school, because I'd drive you home from school, drive me off from school. I'm like, all right, I got to go back and like do my locker combination 67 times. And then like come back home, and it was a nightmare, man. And it got me to the point where like probably the worst was, it got me to the point of suicidal ideation. Never where I attempted to take my life, but where I was like, okay, it's time. Like, enough of this fucking bullshit. How am I going to go about killing myself, like, with the least, you know, mess possible? You know, mechanically, what am I going to use? When am I going to do this? How can I do it with, like, the least fallout? And that was probably...
In high school?
Yeah, 9th grade for sure, and then I think junior year as well. I think senior year, I kind of started seeing a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel, because I was like, maybe getting out of college, maybe getting into college will, like, somehow help this. Senior year, I was just kind of holding on to the end of getting out of high school, thinking, like, that would bring about some kind of change. But yeah, 9th grade definitely had some definite suicidal thoughts, and then 11th grade as well. I remember those being like the 2 worst years.
I remember, it's funny because you'd say something and then you think back on like all kinds of other stuff that had happened, or like once you learn a fact and you like use it to kind of like go back and look at things. And I remember at some point, it was like something that stuck out in my mind. I can't remember when I first like remembered this story. It was like after you had told me that you were OCD. And I remember one time I was over here and I had spent the night, and the next morning maybe this wasn't OCD at all. Maybe you were just pissed about this, but I was getting cereal, and this is like, I was a dipshit too, so like I'm full, like that's something like I'm trying to like reconcile with. But I remember I had cereal the next morning, and I opened the box of cereal from the bottom of the box, and open. I mean, it was like totally functional. It was like the same
Right.
thing, but I'd opened it from the bottom of the box and like pour my. It was like Cheerios and hadn't even noticed. And you got like really upset with me, and you were like so upset, and you sat at the table and spent there with like tape and like taped the cereal box
dude,
at the bottom like back together and spent like 20 minutes like taping it all up, and then in the bag too. I forget what you did with the bag on the. It's like turned the bag around so it would be so the cereal could open from the top of the box.
Totally, dude.
And it's like at the time I was like, God, this guy's like so particular about
This fucking guy and his Cheerios, man. Nah, dude, it's because if I didn't do that, if I ate from the bottom of the box, or I didn't walk up, we're recording this from my mom's basement.
We're coming to you live from Alex's mom's basement,
where we spent a copious amount of time during our adolescence. I used to walk up and down. If I didn't walk up and down these stairs, whatever the number was, or I didn't perform whatever, compulsion that took hours and hours of my day away, I would lose something about myself. Typically, what it was. It all started in 5th grade with anxiety that my mom would die on the way home from work, and so I'd have to go through these compulsions in order to ensure her safe return from work. And then it started to get into like more personal shit. Like if I eat from the bottom of the Cheerio box, like I'm going to lose all of my soccer ability, or I'm going to lose all of my athletic ability. Or if I don't walk them down these stairs 79 times, I won't be funny anymore, and no one at school is going to think I'm funny. Or if I don't open and close the dryer however many times or in whatever way, no girl's ever going to talk to me again, or something like that. It was always some like existential crisis that if this isn't done this way, like something is going to be lost forever, whether it's someone's life or some aspect of who I am. So
you
yeah,
still have the. I'm laughing at like the compulsions, like the thing you're trying to avoid. Like, what do you still have? Like the 7th graders, like no girl will ever talk. Like the whole cafeteria, like laughing at a joke. Like the.
No, I don't have any of any of those like irrational consequences anymore.
Well, not the irrational consequence part, but I'm laughing at the irrational consequence being something that could like only matter to like a 12-year-old. Like no girl ever talking to me again. Like
no, I don't. I mean, I do still have aspects of OCD that like affect my life, but I've done a fairly good job, I think, in recent times, like turning them into a positive, like being very disciplined about fitness and nutrition and things like that.
Yeah, me too.
But that's only when I'm on my medication, and that we won't get into that. But I've gotten to in other episodes. There have been times since then. So it was a year after my sophomore year of college as I first got on the medication, and that really that was a total game changer. And I've tried to get off it since then a couple times throughout my adulthood, and spiraled down into some dark areas, but not definitely like OCD type symptoms, but not in the same traditional sense that I was when I was an adolescent, where it's like if I don't perform this compulsion, it's going to result in some sort of like existential loss. But that's for another podcast. Okay, so let's go back. Let's flash back to. So we got into a little bit, and towards the end of high school, I was talking to you about like what your options were for potentially playing soccer in college. Talk us through what your thought process was senior year as we are graduating. What you were thinking about your life at the time. Hunter was, just to give him some backstory because he won't say this about himself, but not only did he have the option to play soccer in college. He's a super athletic kid. But he's a super smart kid too, like very, very, very intelligent, especially in like the sciences. So what was your thought process senior year about where your life was headed? Actually, let me lay the groundwork a little bit, because senior year, you take the SAT, we had all that. You did pretty well in the SAT from what I remember, so you had options. And then we had decided we were going to LSU.
Yeah.
That was, we were both born in Louisiana. That was also a big like bonding thing we had growing up, is that we were huge LSU fans. And so we had like decided, I guess, summer before senior year, before senior year, we took a tour like through the South of all these universities. Yeah. And we'd come back from that and just kind of decided like, oh, I guess we'll just go to LSU, even though it was like the shittiest school that on our list of potential schools, but it was just kind of like a childhood dream. So talk us through that whole process, thinking we were going to LSU, or what you were thinking through all that.
So I guess got to the point at LSU. So we were like getting very close to that point, and probably, I mean, it was late in the game, right? That
I think we'd submitted our housing application and shit.
Or close to that point, yeah. And then I kind of pulled the rug out from under you, and like pretty late, like April almost. Or,
it was spring break. It was right before spring break.
Yeah.
Because I remember going down to spring break senior year, and that was like a big topic of conversation with everyone. Like, oh, where are you going to school?
Yeah.
Da, da, da.
Or like right around that time, like like April, like no joke. And told you I was not going to LSU. And I don't remember if I said I was going to, I think it was like, I'm going to go to Tech, you know, it was, and, honestly, like if I said I had like a good thought process to it, like I'd be lying. It was, like it's almost hard to say, like with the gravity of that kind of decision, or I guess like where our friendship was at that point, like, that it would have like more thought to it, or like the only thing that I really remember, not like I remember it all, but like what I remember about my thought process at that point in my life is like 18 years old was like I was having so much fun, I guess, our senior year. Like everyone there felt like that was the first time we were like really out and doing stuff everywhere with everyone, and was like, I like didn't want to leave Atlanta. It was like that was the only thing, was like, and not even like in an entirely like positive way, but was like scared to leave Atlanta almost, or like didn't want to go like away from home or anything, and was like I want to stay here, I don't want to go like out of state or anywhere. And it was like jumped up on me like maybe right after spring break or something. It was like I feel like we had like such a good time there, and was like with all it wasn't like entirely rational or anything like that, but it was like almost like preemptively homesick, or like I don't want to leave this city. And you know, I remember that being like a hard feeling, like I was fucking you over. It's like I do remember like feeling like that, or like it was this is really good to get like almost like breaking up with your boyfriend was how
that's how I felt too. No, I think it's like an apt description. That's how I felt too.
Yeah.
It was like you're breaking up with your high school sweetheart, and you're going to different schools.
Yeah, and it was just like not even knowing like what going to college would mean or anything, or like you don't like any conceptualization of like, you know, what that would feel like or something like that, or but you know, being like, all right, I don't want to leave like this city, like this place feels like home, and I don't want to go anywhere else. And then that was, you know, maybe like even a cheap way out, because there was like other people we knew, you know, going there, so it was like wouldn't be like, I don't know if I'd have like the, you know, the personal motivation to make that decision if we didn't have like lots of friends going to Tech as well.
Right.
But that's where my head was at, like at the time when that had happened.
Were there any academic considerations? Because Georgia Tech compared to LSU is kind of night and day in terms of the quality of institution they are.
I feel like not as much as I was probably playing it up at the time. As like, I remember my dad, and I remember saying this as like the reason, you know, it was like, I remember my dad didn't want me to go to LSU, or but was like, you know, really cool on that, and was like, you know, my dad attended LSU too, so it wasn't like, but he was cooler on LSU.
And mom, right?
My mom went all 4 years. My dad went to LSU for a semester, you know, so after he failed out of Tulane. I hope he listens to that. But No, my dad's he's a smart.
He's a super bright dude, actually. Handsome motherfucker too.
He is. Where was I going with that? Oh, anyway, so he had told me, like, you know, was cooler on LSU, and that probably gave me like enough cover to make a decision that I wanted to make on my own, probably,
right.
but to not have to like accept responsibility
right.
for it, maybe, and just be able to be like, yeah, you know, my dad doesn't really want me to go there,
right.
and just not have to like own the consequences of being like, yeah, I just, you know, getting cold feet around like leaving the area where we grew up.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever said anything like about that before, but that's probably the most like accurate where my head was at that time.
Yeah, that's the way I remember. I can remember driving home from soccer practice, I think it was, and you telling it to me and presenting it that way, that like, yeah, my dad really doesn't want me to go to LSU. Like, he really wants me to go to Tech. And that made sense to me. At the time, I was like, yeah, I was devastated by it, because like you said, that was my plan.
No,
that's what I thought was gonna happen. That was my plan. That's what I had planned on happening. And then obviously you were my best friend, so I was excited about the prospect. And I'm different in that sense. Like, I always want to go somewhere different. I can't stay anywhere for more than a fucking year. And I was already feeling that kind of that inclination as an 18-year-old, that I wanted to go somewhere different. I thought I was super excited about going somewhere different, and especially going with my best friend from college. I was like really looking forward to it. And so yeah, it was fucking devastating for me, especially too because I didn't have the same options you did. Because back to OCD, not to just keep fucking drawing on that, but it's a major fucking factor in my childhood and young adulthood. I couldn't make the grades on the SAT. I mean, I made like a 1250, I think, or something around there. So like acceptable, but like I couldn't finish a section on the SAT. I don't think I finished a single section because I would have a bubbling routine for every fucking bubble. So I'd have to bubble it in, erase it, bubble it in, bubble it in, erase it. So my SAT scores were shit, or not shit, but they weren't up to the standard to where like I was getting into. I didn't even get into UGA because you need like a 1300 at that point to get into UGA.
That was a hard school to get into at the time. I mean, that wasn't like. That was like,
yeah, but I remember when I didn't get into UGA, dude. I remember that was another time where actually that was the first time. That was a first time where like I really confronted OCD as like an enemy. Like, fuck this shit. And that was a big turning point for me too, where it was like, I'm not going to be defeated by this shit. And I didn't go back to like the suicidal ideation. I was like, dude, I need to get my fucking shit together with this disorder, because this is now having major impacts on my life. Like, this isn't just me like not making the soccer team because, you know, I'm constantly thinking about whether I tie my cleats the right way instead of focusing on what I'm supposed to do on the field. This is now like this is going to affect the rest of my life. I didn't get into the state school that I live in. I remember that being a big deal. And so when all of a sudden at the end of the year, when that rug was put out in front of me, pulled out from under me, I wasn't left with like a shit ton of options. Fortunately, I'd applied to just random schools like South Carolina, and they'd give me an academic scholarship for whatever reason. So I had that on the table, but I didn't want to go there. And I also had too much pride to go to like Georgia State or, you know, somewhere near home. So yeah, that was a major moment for me. And that was, I don't know, at the same time, I remember feeling pissed, like, God damn it, I can't believe this is fucking happening. But if anything, more pissed at myself that I didn't have better backup plans. And then also feeling like that makes a lot of sense. It, like, for a guy like Hunter, who was really fucking good at science, like, this makes a lot more sense for this dude. Like, it seems like a much better, like, academic institution for him going forward. And then after about a month being like, okay, like, this is fine. He'll be better off there in the long run anyway.
Well, that was the ironic part. It was
right.
Like, I almost failed out of school.
So that's the next thing. So yeah, so that was my thing at the time. Like, oh, this would be perfect. Hunter, he'll go to Georgia Tech. This is an engineering institution. It's a great school of science. Hunter is like this genius scientist of our friend group.
Yeah,
but take us through how things actually played out when you got to college.
Yeah. Well, I didn't fail out. So that was I got gentleman C's for 4 years there. That was not a whole lot to tell.
Well, okay, go ahead. If you have anything else, I have. Okay. Well, what I remember thinking, the first shocking thing to me when you got to Georgia Tech is that you immediately joined a fraternity, and that seemed totally. That took me by more surprise than anything, because that seemed counter, going back to the way I had viewed our approach to social life in high school and college. In high school. Perhaps I'm just jaded and I have like an inflated sense of self, but in high school, especially senior year, like when thinking about fraternities became a thing, I looked at it kind of like the prom thing or going to homecoming. I remember thinking like we're above that, or like we're not too cool for that. Like we don't need to do that shit. Like we don't need to go to prom. Like we have enough friends amongst ourselves, or like we don't need a fraternity. We're cool enough ourselves to like meet people and get to know people. And then I remember you joining a fraternity. I was like, what's going on here? This is not the dude I thought I grew up with. So talk about that.
I don't think I knew, like, I really didn't know very much about them, honestly. Like, I hadn't even, like, considered it as, like, a thing before going into college. And then, it was like my roommate joined, Ryan
our
joined, our mutual friend Ryan joined, who was my roommate, and he had pledged before me. And, I don't know, I was conflicted about it and just did, it was like, seemed like a fun group of guys. And I mean, it really was just kind of like a roll of the dice. Like, I'm just going to like jump in and do this thing. Like, did not give it, like, again, and maybe this was always the case. Like, I don't think I had like the same level of like rationalization around what we did or didn't do in high school. I mean, there was like, I don't remember, and maybe it's just like jaded with memory, but like thinking back on those things, or you're talking about like homecoming or prom or anything like that, like I don't remember like being like regardless of it's like anything said or not said about that stuff, like I just don't remember having like really strong rationalizations for why I was or wasn't doing those things. So that was kind of, it was like went there, did did rush and everything. I was like, whatever, it's like a house full of guys that like drinks and parties, and like Ryan's joining. I was like, what the fuck? Like,
in hindsight too, dude, honestly, if I had gone to Georgia Tech, not to talk shit about Georgia Tech, I probably would end up joining one too, just because it's a totally different social environment than if you had gone to like an LSU or a UGA or something like that. I feel like it's, if you want to like be around it, it's harder to be around like-minded people or people with your same social.
The social life on that campus is definitely like Greek life for sure. Not that like you have to do it to have a good time. Like I knew plenty of people there who like weren't in fraternities or sororities, who had like a great time on campus. Like it's not like a requirement or anything, but it definitely was like made it, it's like just made it easier when you do it. It's like, what? It's like, this is where like the fun is. Like this is where people are like drinking and partying and cutting up. And again, like I think before I even rushed, like I had very little idea of like what a fraternity was at all. Like I think I was very just like behind the curve with everything. I think when I got to college, just in terms of like pick anything you want, like knowing how the world works, like being exposed to things. So it was like, just easy enough to, especially, it's like you rush to, and it's like, again, a fun group of guys like partying. And it's like,
it would be hard to turn down, honestly, because I remember even going through kind of the rush process with you that first week and being at some of those parties, and it's like, it'd be hard to turn down. It was a great fucking time. What were, even into childhood, so think back to childhood and then going into college, like what were your ambitions? What were your childhood dreams? Like what did you want to be when you grew up? And then more specifically, when you had like a better conception of the world, although you're saying it was still limited when you got to college, what did you want to do once you entered college? So start childhood dreams and then 18-year-old dreams.
I don't ever remember having any. And I mean that in like the most literal way possible. Like I don't, like outside of like age like 6 or 7, you're gonna be like a fucking firefighter or something. Like, I don't remember. Yeah, or a professional ninja. I don't remember having like even to this. I mean, I guess it's too late. Like, I'm 30. Like, whatever, you know. But it's like, even to this.
Don't
day,
say that.
No. But in all honesty, like, I'm not. I'm just a very like. Not entirely, but like I'm not like a big like. I've never been someone who has like these big long range plans or like these things I've identified out in the future that I'm like working towards, or like oh, I really want to do that or be that, or, and probably even less so since I've like gotten out of like, you know, youth or whatever age you want to call that at. Like, just I just kind of, you know, in the river a little bit of, you know, where things go, where they take me, and not in any kind of like, I'm not valorizing it or anything. Like, I don't remember having, especially not in college. Like, I was a biology major because I liked the subject, and my only assumption was like, oh, I'll learn that and it'll work out career wise. But, you know, it was like not having any, you know, I don't ever remember being in college and like identifying ambitions or like, I'm gonna go do this thing and be like, I mean, even, you know, biology is an incredibly broad discipline, right? I mean, it's like all kinds of shit you get. Like, I just did like any class I needed for requirements, and like, if you were really like gonna do it, you would kind of pick certain subsets of the field to go get like a lot more experience in, and then go down that road of like, you know, maybe that goes to like graduate school, or, you know, as a professional discipline of something like that. Like, I didn't do any of that at all. And, you know, I think when I got out of college, I have taken like whatever job is available to pay the bills. And I mean, I'm here right now. That's so you know, I don't have a good answer, to be truthful, and I'm not being evasive either. Like, I don't ever remember. Maybe I'm forgetting things that, I mean, there's always things like I really liked, or like that sounds exciting, or I want to go do that, but nothing like, no major overarching like motivating force driving me towards a, you know, a discipline or a profession or like a thing I want to be or do.
I get you. How do you think your life would have been different if we had gone to LSU? Do you think it would have?
I don't think it would have. In professional sense, not really. I don't think I like great. Like, I don't see anything, like, looking back on that, like, I don't see anything related to, you know, like, I don't think I would have done better in school. Maybe I wouldn't have, but like, I think a lot of it was just immaturity too. Like, I didn't get up and go to class. I mean, it wasn't even like not partying, or, I mean, like, I think my mom probably thinks it was just like partying all the time, and that, but like, honestly, it's just like no motivation or that motivating force. So, I mean, really the only actual difference that probably would have occurred, I think, outside of us going to college together, and I think that would have been a great time in and of itself. But, you know, not meeting my wife, obviously, would be the only thing that, which would suck. But that would be the only thing that did not occur that, you know, would be radically different from the road I went down, right? Like, I wouldn't have met my wife there and wouldn't be where I am right now.
So get into that. Tell us about your wife, meeting her. And
I met my wife in college, freshman year.
Yeah, I remember you calling me up the end of freshman year at South Carolina and told me you like were starting to hang out with this chick.
Yeah.
I can remember where I was when you first told me that.
Yeah. About my wife. I remember from college, I remember her being, like, thinking she was way out of my league.
Yeah.
And especially as, like, a very inexperienced, immature person, like, you know.
And she's a year older.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember just being like, when someone was like, oh yeah, this, you know, she thinks you're cute. It was like couldn't believe, like, thought people were fucking with me. And feeling like she was just like way out of my league.
I remember you telling me that too, or something along those
I really
lines.
felt like that. And I mean, it was very awkward to, like, led to a lot of awkward situations because I was definitely like an awkward person at that point. And
I think you can say that, but that's not true. You've always had great social skills. You've never had a problem like interacting with males or females.
Not with women. I really like. I think not like in just like a normal social environment or anything, but in terms of like
a girl you were interested in.
Yeah, I think that there's a certain like, you're not. You can't. How am I trying to put this? Like, I feel like you have to be like ready. Like you're not like to like really be at that point of like being in a relationship with someone or, like putting yourself on the line like that, right? Or like, I have feelings for you, or I like you, or even not like just, like a one night stand situation. Like there's a certain like readiness that you have as a person, or like a confidence or a, willingness to be rejected or to be, undesirable or whatever you want to call it, or, lots of different things. But I definitely feel like I wasn't at that point at the time when she had made it, had told someone else like, oh, I like this guy or whatever. And like, I wanted to be, but like I wasn't there, and went through kind of the awkward motions of
trying to initiate the relationship.
Yeah, trying to do that, and having it not go successfully, or not, obviously it went successfully. We're married, but like not being able to like put myself out there, or to be even with it's like it's almost embarrassing after, because it's like someone's already saying like they like you, so the rejection component of it is like gone. It's like, why can't you like make the move or like do this thing? And it was like just not being at that point personally of being able to do it, or like not like comfortable in my own skin, or something like that, almost to get to that point. So we went through all the initial awkwardness way longer than it needed to go on with like a 19-year-old man. Right. Probably like I'm very sympathetic to her, but we locked it down, and then I started dating her seriously probably after a few months of her probably being like,
so like
what the fuck is wrong with this guy?
It's like sophomore year?
Over the summer. I mean, it was after the summer of our freshman year in college, and when I was living home here and going back to tech. Yeah. And, God bless her, she was very patient. And then, we started more seriously dating over the summer, and then by the time of sophomore year, we've been dating very seriously, and I have dated and I've married her very seriously since then, and it's been really good. If I had to impart words of wisdom on the podcast, it would be marriage is a very good thing. I think it's a very worthwhile exercise. It's made me easily of like anything that I think of, or like endeavors that I've done in terms of bringing me like personal fulfillment, or making me a more complete person or something like that. Like I absolutely think that's it. It's like that, and the relationship with my family and my closest friends is like, that's like it. It's like, what else do you need from kind of your human experience, right? Just to have that type of connection with another person.
Right. Beautiful. That's exactly what I wanted. I want to get into that, but you've brought us to it already. When you went into college, well, let me flash back a little bit back to high school, and it kind of relates not only
to... Can I pee real quick?
Yeah.
I gotta pee really quick.
Okay. So to kind of connect our friendship experience to the words of wisdom that you just imparted on the listeners about marriage, high school, we like didn't date girls, really. And this goes back to like certainly was a contributing factor to like the awkwardness you were referencing when you first started dating your wife Kelly, or like not having I don't think it's, I guess it's balls, confidence, not even knowing how to go about it. Like, we didn't date that many girls in high school. Like, we never had girlfriends in high school. Like, neither of us had, like, long-term girlfriends in high school, which I think a lot of people do. And I want to say that it's bad.
I had one. For like 3. Maybe not even.
Yeah, I didn't even include her. I know you're talking about... yeah, but, like... You know, it wasn't any, and me too, like maybe like a couple months at a time, like something like that. And like, what you're like, you know, going to third base with this chick. It's not like you're going over and fucking this chick regularly or anything. Like, that wasn't our experience. And and once again, I want to say, like, we weren't fucking losers. We had, like, we had girls that were interested in us. We weren't like the biggest studs in school. Like, we had options, but we did not develop our like our romantic capacities at all in high school whatsoever. I remember having the same feeling getting to college and be like, dude, like, I'm going to be learning on the fly here about how to like pick up girls. In large part, that's because, and I want to get your take on this, we spent so much time together. Like, you joked about it when you said about you not going to LSU, that being like a breakup, but it really was like you were basically my boyfriend in high school. And like and so when we left, I think it did create this like chasm and problem. And no, it did for me, like this like emptiness emotionally, because it's like, oh, where's my boyfriend? Where's my best friend? And we both kind of had to fend for ourselves, I feel like, in terms of like, okay, we need to learn how to like pick up girls here.
Or hang out with like other people, period.
Or hang out with other people aside from each other. Yeah, even dudes, other dudes. Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point as well. Because that's true, dude, because when I got to South Carolina, my freshman year, well, in large part, I was super resentful about having to go to South Carolina because I felt like left at the altar with the LSU thing.
We're carrying this metaphor like a little far.
But yeah, I was resentful, and I was like, fuck it, I'm not even going to attempt to make friends. I'm just going to make as good grades I can and get out of here, which is what I did. But the point of me saying this, to tie it back to the words of wisdom you're giving us about marriage is, what was your mindset growing up and through college about like getting married and living a traditional lifestyle? Because I never gave it any thought, specifically getting married or like living a very traditional lifestyle, like graduating college, getting married, starting a family, getting a 9-to-5 job. I never gave any of that any thought until I graduated college, and all of a sudden all my friends started getting married. It was like when I ultimately ended up at UGA, University of Georgia, and graduated from there. And then almost immediately after we graduated in 2010, my friends from college and high school started getting married. And I was left with this feeling, and still do have this feeling, where I was like, wait a second, guys, like, no one passed me the memo that, like, college was, like, our final few years of childhood, and then as soon as we're done and get our degree, it's time to settle down, become adults, get married, and like start a career and a family. Did you have that impression? What was your thoughts growing up and then being in college about like the transition into adulthood? Because to me, it like slapped me in the face how quickly people grew up.
I never really thought about it like that. I mean, I don't remember having any thoughts about it at all growing up, or even, you know, it was very organic. It wasn't like any kind of planned thing, or like, okay, this is like the next step. Now I do this, or other people are getting married, I'm going to get married, or anything like that. It was, you know, obviously there's a cultural component to marriage. It wasn't like I just thought about it out of the blue or something like that. I mean, it was, you know, it's like a thing people do, so it's not like that. But I mean, it was very like, I've been with this person for a very long time and, find myself like, this is the only person that I want to be with for the rest of my life. And now I can just kind of seamlessly make that commitment to them. Right. So now I can, now I don't know what you would call it, like a formalization of it or something like that. But, it was, in that sense, it was very organic, and that's kind of the next step, or that's what happened. And almost like once I got married, it was like I saw what it was for, and it like making that commitment is very freeing for the relationship. It's like now I can like totally be myself for this other person, right? And it's a very liberating liberating feeling, right? You'd be able to give yourself to another but like I can be totally myself for this person now, right? And I can like it's like just the relationship goes so smoothly after that. It's like now I'm me, I'm not going anywhere. Like it's just us, right? Like we've formalized this commitment. We're together forever, so and I think once I got to that point, it was like after I got married, before that, it was like kind of the cultural thing. I was like, I don't want to be with anyone other than this woman. I'm going to get married. Like, that's what people do. I love her. I want to get married. And then afterwards, it was like, oh, that's why people get married. Like right. That's why it's, 15,000 years old, or it's like that's the thing. That's how it seemed to me, at least.
Okay, I find it fascinating you keep using the term liberating, because when I think of marriage, I think the exact opposite. It terrifies me because I just view it as these shackles that would take away my freedom. And I just got out of really the only real relationship I've ever been in. I've been dating this girl for 3.5 years, but constantly off and on, due both to distance and me being a fucking nutcase. And that was the biggest thing, and ultimately the reason why, I'm not in the relationship now, is because I can't handle the concept of being beholden to someone else. And not only being beholden to someone else in like the sense of monogamy, but being beholden to someone else in the sense of like, I constantly have to be there for you emotionally. Your emotional baggage now becomes my emotional baggage. Your professional baggage now becomes my professional baggage. I think for me personally, it's like, dude, I'm so like, in some ways I'm very stable and very disciplined, but in other ways I'm just this like leaf being thrown around in the wind. And so having to like tie myself to someone else in a lot of ways feels very much like an incarceration. So it's interesting to hear you say that liberating thing. I will say this though, in the last couple months since I've been out of that relationship, I do miss the relationship in a sense that I'm like, man, like things were a lot more clear. Like things were, now I like walk down the street and I see like a hot girl, or I'm thinking like, oh man, like, who's the next girl I'm going to hook up with, or what's the next relationship I will be in, or should I be like trying to pursue either hooking up with girls or getting a relationship? It's like this whole other aspect of life that like is unclear to me and is like not settled. So I do see like the benefits in that sense. Did you envision, like, growing up, did you always just assume you would get married?
I don't remember giving it a lot of thought.
Any thought at all?
Nah.
Yeah, I guess maybe I just think too much about everything, which is probably, a huge influence me starting this podcast, because I just have so many questions about existence. But I can remember, ever since the concept of marriage has like been in my mind, I can only ever remember being dubious. And I can remember the earliest conversations I have about it would be in college, where like in college, people actually started talking about marriage. And I remember even the first time anyone ever brought it up was sophomore year, driving down the spring break with Lenny, who we've referenced earlier, who will actually be on the podcast next week. I'll be interviewing him next week. Our friend Jimmy, who actually I would love to get on the podcast as well. He's a really, he's a very smart dude and has some good thoughts about everything. But anyway, driving down to spring break, a sophomore year with them, and Jimmy had been dating the same girl since 8th grade, and we were now sophomores in college. And Lenny said, like half jokingly, like, "Oh, so when are you and his girlfriend? When are you guys going to get married?" And then Jimmy saying, like, "Oh yeah, like probably once I graduate college and like get my loans paid off. So probably like a year or two after college we'll get married." And that was the first time I ever heard someone actually discuss it who I was a peer of mine. And I remember thinking, like, holy fuck, like that's right. Like we're about to graduate. We're going to graduate here at some point, and then like people are going to get married. And I immediately remember thinking, like, dude, I don't think I could ever make that decision. At the time, I was 20 years old, and I can remember having conversations about marriage for the next couple years, junior year and senior year, and espousing those same thoughts, like talking to my roommates and my friends in college about, like, guys, I don't know, like with this whole marriage thing, like y'all down with this shit? And everyone kind of, espousing kind of the same things that you're saying now. Like, yeah, I think eventually I'll get married sometime in my 20s, maybe early 30s. And me always thinking, like, I don't know, man, it just doesn't quite make sense to me. And then people telling me then as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, like, nah, dude, you say that now. You're in college. You're used to this lifestyle. You'll change. You'll get around to it. And dude, I'm telling you, over the past decade, since that, like, marriage became a real thing in my life from my friends up until now, 10 years later that I'm an adult, I'm even more solidified than ever in this boat that, like, dude, I could never see myself getting married.
Yeah, I remember this from my wedding toast that you gave.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. I didn't put it in my notes. Go ahead, talk about that.
You just heard it. That was at my fucking what was that? At the rehearsal dinner.
I was the best man at Hunter's wedding. So
the only thing it was literally that exact same spiel. All it was missing is a lot of crying as well.
I think essentially I came up with it like on the car ride over to the rehearsal. Maybe the night before I'd given some thought
about that.
The what?
The toast. Yeah,
I gave some thought. I knew I had to say something.
No, I knew you had to say something. Well, I don't think you had to say something.
I remember thinking either the night before or on the drive over, like, oh shit, I'm the best man. I probably have to say something at the rehearsal dinner. Or maybe Lenny had said something to me. One of our friends had like mentioned to me, hey dude, are you like, do you have something together? And I certainly didn't have anything like formally written, but essentially what I said was, I just wanted, I don't know, man, I can't go up in front of people, and it's the same thing with this podcast. I can't like bullshit. I knew I couldn't just go up there, and I knew you would know if I did. And really I was speaking to you more than anyone. I didn't really care what anyone else thought.
It was a good test. I liked it. It was...
But yeah, I remember thinking, like, I can't just go up there and be like, oh, like, marriage, what a beautiful institution. Finally, like, Hunter has arrived. No, and I think essentially what I said was, like, I've never believed in marriage. I still don't believe in marriage. I don't think I'll probably ever get married, but I do believe in love, and I know I love my friend, and I know I've never loved anyone like this friend, and if he's making a commitment like this to his wife, I can't even imagine the kind of love that is blossoming between the two of them. Something along those lines. And I was crying the whole time. I'm an emotional guy. But yeah, it was the same thing. Like it was
good.
It was
good.
We need to find that. Hopefully someone has that on tape somewhere.
I have a piece of it.
You do?
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I still, to this day, I can't ever envision myself doing it. And that's not to say that I can't envision myself being in like a life partnership, but I certainly know there's, just from a philosophical perspective, like there's no way I'm formalizing a relationship beneath the auspices of a religion or a governmental institution, just like from a pragmatic standpoint. That to me makes no fucking sense. And it seems to me like totally robotic, mindless behavior. Do you understand where I'm coming from? That from that standpoint, like, okay, why can't we just come to each other and be like, hey, Kelly, I love you to death. There's no one else I want to be with. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Shake my hand. Like, why do we have to go through this whole process where we're formalizing this either, and it's not like y'all got married at a church, but a lot of people do, and I'm sure your mom probably would have wanted you to. Like, why do we have to go through this formalization underneath the auspices of a religion, or like getting it formalized with the government, aside from like tax purposes? That, to me, that just doesn't make any sense. It just seems mindless. It seems like drone, robot, zombie behavior. We're all just kind of like marching in line and doing what everyone else does. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying.
What's your take on it, though? I want you to push back here.
I would say that, why do anything? You know, it's like, why?
Because it makes sense. I do things that make sense. I do things that are logical. I do things that make me a better person. I do things that are in line with like my principles as a human being. I don't just do things because I'm told I have to do them or because someone else is doing them.
Well, you do. I mean, that
like what?
You wear clothes.
If I didn't have to, I would. I try to wear as little clothes as possible. I'm sitting here in a tank top. I'm always wearing a tank top and shorts, and it's the same thing, dude. I've thought about this as well. If I did not have to wear... I hate wearing clothes.
No one makes you wear clothes.
But I would be put in a cage if I didn't.
That's true.
I only wear clothes because if I didn't, I would be put in a cage. So that's one thing I do because it's to my benefit, because I don't want to live in a cage. And I think marriage is the same thing. I don't want to artificially put myself in a cage, and that's how I view the institution.
Yeah, I'm not like well equipped to have like a real, like, I haven't thought so much about it, right? It's like the institution itself is like, it's very old, right? Like, why do these things exist? Like, why are they so, like, why do we, like, what significance do things hold, right? Like, I just got back from like the Parthenon, right? It's a crumbling building. Why are you there looking at it? Like, what are you looking at? Like, what are you seeing? And you're seeing the foundations of like Western culture, like human culture itself, in a sense. Like, it's like a nod to how far back the human experience goes. I mean, it's making it like, I feel like I'm giving it like a deeper significance than I'm equipped to defend.
It's a personal thing, dude.
No, but like, why, you know, we
do you view it as like an essential aspect of human existence?
No, I don't. But I don't think it's purposeless. I don't think that it, like, I think it's a nod to like where we find ourselves today. Like, the things that we do, or our culture itself, like, flows out of conscious decisions people have made for thousands of years, and we're at the point where we are now because we've kept those decisions alive, in a sense, or we affirm them, or what they stand for. Like, the world you exist in, or that you benefit from, is made by those institutions that are the building blocks of what it is, right? Like, not making like a value judgment on it, but like, the world you would live in is extremely different if people don't make that kind of commitment, right? Yeah. So you're living in a world that, you know, because people have affirmed that decision or carried those cultural values down through generations and generations and generations, you're now here living in that world and the benefits that it confers on you, right? Like, I don't know how that's tying back to anything other than you know, I see those things as having value.
Right. So you see it in a way as like this is like you fully participating in what it means to be a human being in society today.
No, that's not really what I feel like I'm trying to say. I don't feel like I have a great point. I'm not talking about like specifically with myself or like what it means to me or anything. Like, I think the part for me of like, I don't give it a lot of thought in the sense that like that's a thing people do. I'm personally willing to like, I want to make that commitment to another human being, and like culturally what we do is we get married and we make that commitment and we formalize it in a government or a church, and that's what it is. And mine's probably more, you know, just in line with that, right? Like, I want to spend the rest of my life with this woman. I'm fine partaking in the cultural expression of that in the day and age that I live. In terms of the value of the institution itself, or in what sense I'm defending it philosophically, I guess, that I feel like what I'm getting at is like it has value because it's like a thing that we've carried on since, you know, humans first settled down out of the trees and went ahead and made this choice to like construct the society a certain way, right? It like a direct line back to that point in time.
Yeah, and it does make sense to me in that sense, right? It makes sense for me from an evolutionary perspective in terms of humans are so, well, an infant human is so complex and requires so much nurture in order to reach the full expression of our intellectual and cognitive capacity, that it requires intensive rearing. And a complete rearing of a child, of an infant human to adulthood, requires both a male and a female in order for that child to reach its full potential, I would say. And I would say that's probably where this institution comes from, is that as we evolved from apes and the human brain became more and more complex, we required both parents to be around for a significant period of time, years, in order for the child to fully evolve to its full human potential, both to survive physically and then to develop its full mental capacity. So the concept makes sense to me from an evolutionary perspective and from a child rearing perspective. Along those same lines, my dubiousness, if that's a word, of the institution of marriage is very much in line with that same line of thinking, right? I come from a single parent household, right? And my child rearing nurture experience through childhood probably was very incomplete due to the fact that it was only one parent doing so. And so that's certainly left me immature, undeveloped, or underdeveloped in a lot of ways as an adult. And that's why I feel as a 30-year-old man now I'm still like 10 years, a decade behind like my cultural maturity or social maturity in some ways. But it doesn't make sense to me, like just going back to what I said, like the formalization of it and the fact, it just seems very robotic in the fact that everyone does it at the exact same time, essentially meeting their partner in similar circumstances. To me, it's just disappointing because I feel like no one's exercising any critical thinking in the matter. And I feel like I've been very blessed, and you in particular, to have super intelligent friends who have the ability to critically think and analyze things from a very different perspective. and who have creative and cognitive capacities that would allow them to just soar into every area of life. And yet I see, and I really, of all of my friends I've met throughout my life, I really would put you at the top or near the top of that list of people with that potential. And it's disappointing to me to just see, like, I just see this in my head, and I envision you in particular and a lot of my friends. I just see bursting potential, capacity, and creativity. And then I just see everybody just gets, it's like I see it shooting out like rays out of a fucking star. And it could go in all these areas. But then I see all of it manifesting itself in the exact same direction. And that's what's disappointing to me, is I'm like, damn. I mean, that's cool if he's at the end of the day, all I want for my friends is that they're happy, right? That's the end of the day. That's all I want. But for me, as like a crazy person who just bounces around the world without any direction and just constantly questioning everything, and who wants to walk outside naked in the streets, right? For me personally, I'm like, damn. I really wish, like, I don't know, instead of just doing that, he had like put that on the back burner and gone and done something totally out of the box instead. And I feel that way about everyone. So this podcast and this conversation is just like me trying to wrap my head around the decisions that people are making and why they're making them, and what effect it's having on them emotionally and their view of their life. I'll let you jump in here in a second because I know I'm on a bit of a monologue here. But that being said, the counter argument would be, you seem, and you've been a part of my life, an integral part of my life since 5th grade. And even throughout college, when we didn't go through college, or even in post-college life, when we don't see each other with any regularity, we're still in each other's lives. You always seem stable, happy, and content with your station in life. And I cannot say that about myself. Like, I'll go through periods where I'm like, I'm good, man. But then I'll go through periods where I'm not good, man. And even periods where I am good, man, it's like, I'm good, but I'm still, like, not sure about what's going on here on this planet. So I guess that would be the counter argument. An objective observer could come into this conversation and be like, yeah, Alex, where have your crazy thoughts gotten you? It's gotten you like psychological and emotional instability throughout your life, and it's gotten you to a point where like you have no clear direction of where you're going from this day forth. And look at your buddy Hunter. He has a loving wife, a loving relationship. He's soon going to embark on creating a loving family that supports him. He has a stable job. He has financial security. He's a happy, stable human being. What are you? You're like this rambling nomad. So that would be the counter argument. I know I've said a lot there. Just whatever's coming to your head now, talk about it.
I don't think that any of that stuff, like, I don't think I don't know how to frame it. It's like there's like nowhere to be, or like nothing to do, or like everything you're saying to me sounds like dropping like a pin on a map and like getting somewhere, doing something. I mean, it's like my marriage isn't a vehicle of like self-actualization, or neither is my job. In fact, my job is probably the opposite of that. But it's like none of those things are like in and of themselves and like of their own. It's like they're a part of me, or choices that I make, but they're not like what get me anywhere, like, or helping me like be stable or do those things. I mean, I'm sure being married has stabilizing features to it, but like I am who I am, and those things are things that I do, but that's not like, I don't really know what I'm getting at there, but you talk about it like a direction, or I would go and do this other thing, or like go be this other person, or like, those are all just hypotheticals or like these like directions I would or wouldn't go down if I wasn't married, or like all these bifurcating choices of would you have done this other thing, or would you go do this, or it's like I'm really like, for me personally, like just trying to be happy who I am with like what I'm doing. It's not like a feature of like choices I make, or the job I did or didn't take, or like the school I did or didn't go to, or the marriage I did or didn't commit to. It's like those are things that make me happy, so I do them, and I'm happy with, it's like I'm happy with them, or it's like,
no, I totally get what you're saying. And that actually gives me a phenomenal
you could be happy making those same, like you could be happy or not making those same choices, right? Like marriage isn't like it makes you happy, or doing this job or financial security isn't like this thing that makes you happy or makes you stable or brings you to this point, or like, or closes off potential, or like you're the person that you are and doing the things that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not those choices don't close anything off, and they don't open anything up. Like if you were going to go do those things, you'd do them.
Mm-hmm.
Like a married person could still do any of the things that you're doing.
Right. Yeah. I guess maybe you wouldn't have the flexibility like geographically.
Why not?
I mean, I don't think Kelly would want you to like disappear in Latin America for 6 months at a time and just like do like a Che Guevara Motorcycle Diaries type thing. Like that wouldn't be an option. But would you do that if you weren't married?
No.
You touched on professional. You said your professional life might be the opposite of self-actualization. Talk about that real quick. Talk about your professional journey, how it's evolved, and like what you envision in the future.
It's very corporate. I took a job, like the first job offered to me out of college to pay the bills. I worked in a call center, which was like the least sexy job. It's like the stereotype of like a bad corporate job someone out of college would do. And I've just taken like the best opportunity in front of me that I've had since then. I mean, I have a moderate amount of ambition. I try and do a good job at the job that I'm at and try and get promoted to, the next level, like logical level of what that is. It's kind of led me down a path of very corporate, like working in supply chain. So, I mean, that's just like, I don't love it. I don't feel like it's like some fundamental expression of who I am to manage inventory, but it's probably, I would say the best thing I'd say was like it's convenient at this point. Like I know how to do it. I get paid reasonably well to do it. It allows me to enjoy like the other aspects of my life. I don't put as much thought into it as I should. Like I should work harder at finding something I love doing more, and then like going and getting the skills necessary to go do that so I can, that's an area of my life that like I would like to go be, more self-actualized at in that sense. Like I get lazy or like procrastinate with like doing what's convenient with a lot of things if I had to be like honest about myself or my strengths and weaknesses as a person. So it's, I don't mind my job at all, but there are other things I obviously like more. I'd like to be doing more. So I always tell myself, 6 months or, start looking to do something new or really swing out there or anything, but it just gets convenient too. It's like, that's probably the part where, where I feel like I've chained myself to something is kind of like, you just start to get comfortable with like a paycheck, and it's like, you make a little bit more money the longer you're at a position, and the perks go up at everything. And, so going down kind of a steady path of just like, whatever, I show up and I know how to do this job and I do it reasonably well and I'm compensated reasonably well, and just day in and day out.
Right.
So
do you have any professional ambitions or creative ambitions that like are in the back of your head or that you feel you've put on the back burner? Do you think about that? Like,
no, I mean, when I got out of college, I was very much like, I'm going to go back to school and get a graduate degree, or, you know, in biology. I mean, that was what I was really kind of like focused on. And my grades were like extra shitty, and I took the GRE and didn't get like a great score on it or anything. Not enough to overcome a really shitty GPA for that kind of stuff. So I could have, like, I guess kind of the decision I was faced with was like, I could really go like Spartan mode and, you know, quit working and make, you know, me and my wife kind of go down the road of, you know, lowering our standard of living a lot, right? To go kind of chase this thing, but it's like not even fleshed out enough to like really go attack it, right? Like, I mean, it's just something I've never been good at, is like really like, you know, identifying what that is and fleshing it out top to bottom. Like, even when I was like really motivated, it was just like super vague and like, I'm going to go get like a master's in like some biology field, right? Like someone who's more like disciplined and motivated is like defining exactly what that is and going, these are the, you know, talking to the right people and going, these are the next, you know, 5-10 steps I need to take to make that happen, and going, all right, I don't give a fuck, I'm gonna go do that. And that's just not a strength of mine. So just kind of like made some, not half-hearted, I mean, I worked a little bit harder at it than that, but like made some, you know, steps towards trying to get into grad school. Nothing crazy. It was like, you know, the only one I got back was like Georgia State for something. I was like, I'm not doing this. So that kind of dropped there. And I didn't even have anything to go on. I mean, I was like, at that point in my life, I was like trying to just read everything. And I thought it would like, again, just to reemphasize, like a very undisciplined approach. Like, I thought for some reason that was going to like bubble up into like a thesis of some sort that was like, it was like reading, you know, just, it was crazy. Like, the idea is like crazy and naive that like something like that would happen. Like, maybe for someone who's like a fucking like certifiable genius, it might happen, who could like, you know, piece together all this disparate stuff and like come up with something like that. But like, that's not me or anything that I'm capable of.
I think you're capable of it. You're a fucking smart dude, and you talk about things you're reading. You're a fucking incredible reader. Like, you're voracious. I've met some smart fucking people through college, and even more so post-college, man, and I don't think I've ever really met someone your level in terms of like their ability to just soak up voluminous amounts of written word. It's fucking crazy. So I don't sell yourself short there. I don't think it's a capability thing or a potentiality thing from an intellectual standpoint. I think it's a discipline thing, and I think you understand that.
Yeah, and you have to like, I mean, again, it was like, I remember talking to my dad about this at one point, but there's like the, you know, there's the, you know, there's like liking cars and being like a mechanical engineer, right?
Yeah.
Like, you fucking love cars, or you want to like do that or work on them in some kind of capacity, or like you want to be a mechanical engineer, right? Like, you're going to go learn like fucking differential equations, which is like Calc 4 or 5, or, you know, it's like, so in that sense, you know, it's like, I remember in my senior year of college, I took theoretical ecology, and at the same time I was reading, like literally at the same time I was reading the class, I was reading The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, and which covers like, the class is almost like, is the nuts and bolts and the, you know, how the machinery works of what he's talking about. And I'm like reading this book and loving it, and it's like very intellectually stimulating, but like, I hate going to this class, which is like the calculus of how that works.
Right.
And it's like, because the class is hard, and the class you have to know calculus, and
It
you
requires
have
effort to.
it does, and you have to learn how. And the guy who wrote the book knows how the equations work,
Right.
but it's easier to read it and be like, that's interesting. Like, it's very on surface level versus like going to a class where they're talking about the exact same thing, but like how the math works behind it. And it's like, well, this is fucking boring. But it takes that kind of discipline to like, you can read and digest that book and get a feeling for the concepts and explain that to someone. But you're I'm going to misuse the word. A dilettante?
What the fuck are you looking for?
It's someone who like dabbles, right?
Okay,
you're
yeah.
like, you're just like, you're not, you could never right? You can't like read that book and teach the class. If you learn the equations, you can teach the class, right? Like, so that's kind of I feel like that's kind of the point. I'm a read the book guy and be like, well, that's very interesting, but like, I don't want to go to the class and like learn how to actually do it, because that's hard. So
I'm gonna get a little off topic here. I have a good narrative, and we're kind of coming towards the end of some last few things I want to get your thoughts on about life. But just real quick, I've never really talked to you about this before, and it goes back to something we were talking about prior to the professional stuff. Have you ever gone through in your life like extended periods of depression or mental or psychological instability?
no, I really haven't. And when I'm hesitate to say not no, just completely. Like, I've gone through points, like when in college, I feel like if I look back on it, like where maybe like I was depressed or unhappy in a sense, but I would like, it'd be a disservice to like real mental health issues to be like no one would prescribe me medication for, right? It's like, I'd, talk to a therapist or something maybe who, help you. I've never talked to a therapist before, but like maybe help me sort it out or, approach it with healthier ways. Outside of that, like maybe in college, and I think just kind of the whirlwind of that and what that was and meant, and just, the exposure to lots of uncomfortable situations and everything, like getting me in, weird places mentally and everything. But outside of that, like, no. And I think I've been very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah.
Like, I do really feel like blessed that I feel like I just have like a very, I feel like my
brain.
I guess. I feel like my nature is very even keel and steady. So I don't ride a lot of like highs and lows and everything. So I've gone through periods in my life where I felt like I didn't have good like thought patterns or, get myself into, because it's easy to do that. And even, on a low key scale, like day to day, you can find yourself going down, rabbit holes and stuff like that, just in something like I feel like anyone could relate to. And then, just as all that, just trying to like tease out, like not having mental health issues, but having,
poor thought patterns.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I figured, but we've never actually really discussed that. But I guess because it just hasn't been an issue with you. That's good. I envy that. Personally, so when are you gonna have kids? You're gonna have kids, right? That's the plan?
Yeah. Probably sooner rather than later.
Like within the next 2 years, 3 years?
I would say, like no later than like the next 2 years.
What are your thoughts on that?
I'm okay with it. I went through a lot of like, don't want that, and I'm not okay with that. And
during your marriage?
Yeah, like even recently. I mean, and I've told my wife that as well. And I'm a very like cynical person about like the world, and so I feel like I kind of like ride that, like, or just like the weirdness of like feeling like bringing or like two things. one is like being cynical about the world and how it works, and then feeling like that's a really shitty way to be, and just like,
if you're going to bring a child into the world,
just to be cynical. It's like anyone can be like a fucking cynic, right? And I am, so I'm not like, but it's like, what do you get out of it, right? It's like just expecting like failure or shitty outcomes, and it's like, why? Like nothing's, it's like enough people feel like that, it does get shitty, and that's, I feel like that's kind of like the national psychosis we're in right now, is like enough people have like convinced themselves that like everything's shitty, and because of that we're living in shitty outcomes. So I try and snap out of that and be like, be an optimist, be like, it is going to work out, like it is going to be good. So that's kind of the highs and lows I ride in terms of like, do I want to bring a life into the world when I feel like I'm setting them up for like a worse living standard than I had, or and then the other part is feeling like, am I a complete enough person to impart meaningful I don't know what word I'm like looking for.
Life lessons.
Yeah, but that sounds really trite. Like, but yeah, but like, can I raise a human, right? Like I feel like a very like flawed person myself. So to like, to bring a person into the world, like I could damage them, like, and that feels like a really unfair thing to do to another person, right? Or, it's like taking, like the responsibility of that, or like, wanting to not like fuck up a person and have them like live the rest of their lives with like all the weird shit like you gave them as a child. Right. But anyway, so long story short, like I feel like recently, like I've felt more like at peace with like, we're all fucked up, like we're all gonna fuck up our kids, and it's all just like fucking, it is what it is, right? Like the world is what it is, and you can like check out and be like, well, it's going to shit, or like hopefully it doesn't, and like have a kid and Godspeed,
Yeah, man. I have no plans of getting married, but this is probably a bad combination. But I have no doubt in my mind that I want to have kids. Like, I have no doubt whatsoever that I will be a father at some point. And I have every doubt in the world that I will ever be a husband. And that for me is like a big way. Like, how the fuck do I reconcile those two things? Do I just get like a surrogate and like I raise it on my own? Do I like reach some sort of accord with someone that I do love and care about and who I think will be a good mother? And like, all right, well, we're at least in this for the next 18 years. Do I have like a platonic relationship with the person I procreate with? I have no idea. I guess it just remains to be seen. I don't plan on having kids in the next 2 years.
How do you reconcile the loss of freedom, not wanting to be married due to the loss of freedom, versus having a child and probably even a greater loss of freedom?
I don't know. I think I envision the cost is, the juice is worth the squeeze for me for the kid. Like, to me, that seems like so much more of a joyous and fulfilling and meaningful experience.
Gotcha.
To where, like, I'd be willing to sacrifice my freedom to have that experience.
Gotcha.
With a marriage, I'm just like, it doesn't seem that great.
Gotcha.
Like, I get to fuck the same woman for the rest of my life, but I get held down. Like, the juice doesn't seem worth the squeeze to me. Cool. I'll look forward to the baby coming into the world. Tell him I said, hey. What does your wife think about, what's your wife? Has she been on board with having kids the whole time? Has she gone through her own ups and yeah?
She wants kids.
So she's always been on board with having kids?
Yeah.
Ever since you can remember having that discussion with her. She's never like vacillated in her take on that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Religion. You grew up in a very Catholic household. You went through the whole, song and dance with all of that in terms of like CCD, the like fucking indoctrination course, and getting confirmed and all of that. And you were, I'm not going to say you were into it, but like you were knowledgeable, at least from my perspective, coming from a non-Christian household. Like you had knowledge of the Judeo-Christian whatever, theology.
You're being very generous to me on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
I remember growing up, the only person I knew that could like tell me shit about the Bible or Christianity or even Judaism was you. Lenny, who's Jewish, knew about Judaism, but it wasn't like he could like reference scripture in any way or something like that. I'm not saying that you could pull out like specific lines from the Bible. Maybe you could, but you knew like the basic concept and stories and shit like that. Growing up, so talk to me about your development as a religious or spiritual person. What was your belief in God or a higher power, and how has that evolved?
I think growing up in the Catholic Church and having to do all that stuff, I kind of accepted the tenets of it, I guess, for the most part. And I remember getting into high school and then feeling I think this is probably a very natural course of development for like everyone, but feeling like, the Catholic Church had some just really retrograde opinions on, gay people and abortion and all that stuff, are just feeling kind of like, it's just this anachronism that is just totally out of place, or, that is just on the wrong side of, history, to like borrow that phrase or whatever. And then I think when I got to college and then doing like a really hard kind of science major or whatever, and especially like biology, and reading like, I think I referenced Richard Dawkins earlier, and who wrote The God Delusion.
He's like a noted atheist, right?
Yeah, and then I think I was like, got really into that and was like, okay, I'm an atheist. I was like, read that book and and especially I guess when you get into like evolution or anything, and feeling like super convinced in college. It was like, this is all bullshit. The whole thing, top to bottom, is just a big crock of shit. And then I would say when I got, I'm trying to think of like tracing the intellectual development, or like not intellectual development, like, so I thought I'm the smartest guy alive, and the only smart people know that like God doesn't exist, or like atheism, etc., because I'm reading these books or like talking about these things. And then I read John Gray, who wrote a book called Black Mass, and traces kind of the development of like, the whole thought like where we are today from, the time of like religion and everything, and traces it to like political religions like Nazism and communism, even out of, so he goes, I don't know why I'm getting into this at all, I guess, as well. So he starts with, there's Judaism, and that's like the initial religion, and then they're talking about like their religion, and the Torah is talking about for the Jewish people, right? They're talking about salvation for the Jewish people. And then it was like the really big idea was like when Jesus comes and expands that and talks about like salvation for everyone. And this was like a very seminal development in the history of like thought in that sense. It was like a universal religion, right? It was for everybody. And it had this notion of salvation for everyone. And then he kind of traces it through, then there's St. Augustine, who writes City of God, and then there's, he's talking about separating, there's the kingdom of God, and then there's earth where we live in, and that's like irreparably flawed, and it's two separate spheres, right? So how do we make like where we live, holy or like that, and then traces that all the way through to like the Enlightenment, where it's like, all right, God is not real, it's science, and that kind of does away with God and comes to people still having this striving for God or for the answers to the questions, right? Like the questions are still there, and God, or that concept, answered them, but now it's been dispelled, or at least the people think it does, by science or the Enlightenment. And then that leads to like, but we still have this like very Christian notion of who's saving us, right? Or how are we getting to like heaven or perfection or anything like that? And then that's like creates like the advent of these like political religions, like Nazism or communism is like a direct outgrowth of that. So that was very formative to me in the sense that it talked about, because like, and then he brings that, I feel like I'm kind of like rambling, but he brings that from like atheism too, as like a growth of the Enlightenment, right? And like all these projects for like how to think about the world and what's going on in them. And it's like when you trace it as this outcome, it's like atheism of the kind that like Richard Dawkins or those people talk about is like extremely trivial and just like carries all the fundamental assumptions of religion, and Judaism and the Christian faith is like salvation. But just does away with the whole like God and religion part and exchanges it for science, or exchanges it for fascism, or exchanges it for communism. And that was like the first real like moment for me, is like, I forget when I was, I was like 25 or something when I read that, like, or even younger, but as like, this isn't like this super sophisticated like intellectual proposition. It's just like carries the same set of assumptions about the world. It's just repackaged based on something else. So that was kind of the first time I was like, didn't feel like so insanely smart or anything, just felt like a different kind of religion almost. And then kind of came back to, I guess the fundamental assumptions, or, I didn't come back to being Catholic because I'm not, but at least felt like okay intellectually with like approaching those things again and going, what is, why is this important? What does this mean? Like, what are people talking about when they're, what is the point of this, I guess? And that's kind of, where I came back to it a little bit, or became like comfortable, I guess, intellectually, like believing in God or something like that. Like, I don't know if I do, but that was kind of like my start to finish on that. It was probably a lot more John Gray than
right. So you don't identify as like purely atheist, like there's no God, this was all horse shit.
No.
Okay. So you're holding open the possibility that, yeah, there is some higher power that exists.
Yeah.
And it could potentially be an afterlife.
Yeah.
And that like someone like Jesus or Muhammad did exist.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, because I think we were both raised in religious households.
Yeah.
You Catholic, and then my mom was Baha'i, and so that was a big thing for me too, man, growing up. I guess I just, because, my mom would bring me to all these Baha'i things, it was just, I was something like, oh yeah, God does exist, but I kind of went through the same thing. OCD prevented me from cracking the books. So it was more like discussions with people instead of actually like getting down to the source material itself. But yeah, I've kind of gone through a similar thing where it's like, wait a second, like, dude, if you think that God exists, I went through the same process. Like, you're just a fucking idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how naive could you be? And then now I've gotten to a point without going through all the literature.
Edit out the part where I talk about. I'm like, that's gonna sound terrible and fucking rambling.
And see how it plays. I'll really listen and see how it plays. But yeah, now I've gotten to the same point, the same way I view life in general, like pragmatic, earthly, like existence, everyday existence. I've gotten to this point where I'm like, dude, there's no like prescription for how to go about life. There's no like recipe here for exactly how it's supposed to be done. It's incredibly exciting to know like, oh, I can like approach the seconds, hours, minutes, days, months, and years I have on this earth how I want to. I don't have to live any certain path. I kind of now view religion the same way, where it's like, dude, I'm not even gonna approach like thinking I have any sort of answer at all. Like, I'm just leaving it totally wide open. It could be, it could not be. I have no idea. That's like way above my pay grade. But I want to get people's perspective on that, especially their evolution from childhood now into adulthood. Okay, final thing, sports. Actually, let me pause real quick and make sure. All right. Final topic, sports. Sports has always been like a huge part of our friendship. Obviously we talked about the whole soccer thing, so us participating in sports together, but like following sports as a form of entertainment has been a huge part of our friendship. And that started, I think, at the earliest ages, like being LSU football fans. And then for our social circle more broadly, like just following sports, it's always was a huge topic of conversation, elementary, middle, high school, and even today. But I'm torn with sports at this point in my life, man. I look at it like as a drug. And there's a lot of things in my life. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've developed addictions. And over the last couple years, I feel like I've developed not an addiction, but like a dependence on weed. I feel like I've developed like almost an addiction to podcasts. Like I'm obsessed with podcasts. I listen to them constantly.
I'm obsessed with making good podcasts.
Not making them, just listening to them. But this actually, me and Gage, this is not my first podcast. This is like my first real concerted effort where I'm like confident I'm going to stick with it. But this, honestly, me doing my own podcast is like my approach to treating my addiction to podcasts, because I'm like, dude, you've been listening to these fucking things for years. It's time for you to like do your own if this is something like you're actually passionate about. And so I've come to this point with podcasts specifically where I had to judge. I had to kind of reflect on them. Like, is this an addiction, an unhealthy addiction, or like a passion I want to pursue? And I've landed on this is a passion I want to pursue, which is why I'm doing this podcast. Same thing with weed. Like, is this like an addiction or something you're dependent on, or something that's really like making you a better person, or is like an integral part of like your lifestyle? And I've landed on like, nah, this is like a drug that I should be using like recreationally or potentially medicinally if those situations arise, but not be an integral part of my lifestyle. So I'm trying to clear up these like addictions or potentially obsessions, giving my psychological history. Sports is one I'm really struggling with, because it definitely was a passion of mine throughout my life, especially when I was like playing them. And that seems appropriate, ages 9 through, 22. But now as like going through my early 20s, mid 20s, and now as a 30-year-old, I'm like, dude, this seems like a drug. And I feel like I should be treating it the same way I do like weed or alcohol, to where like I should be using it in total moderation or in social circumstances, and like probably shouldn't have like the ESPN app on my phone, or to be like reading or regularly about it, or listening to podcasts about it, or like following like the NBA standings. Like growing up, we were all in on everything, right? So at least for me, like I started playing fantasy football in 4th grade. And then in high school, we were fantasy football, fantasy basketball, fantasy baseball. I remember we had a fantasy hockey league, a fantasy NASCAR league. Like sports were a huge part of our life. I'm trying to get a hold on how I should approach sports. What's your take on sports?
I think they're great. Okay.
Being a sports fan.
In all honesty, like, I think that I've seldom had, like, the attention span to, like, really sit down and, like, watch that stuff. Like, the only thing that I don't struggle with, like, sitting down and watching is, like, Tech football and Saints football. So probably those, I would say in all honesty, like, those are the 20 to 30, however many, like, Tech games plus, like,
Saints games.
25 to 35 like, sporting events I sit down and watch start to finish in a given year.
Right.
I mean, that, and the other stuff, like, I'll have it on in the background, like, but I'm not, like, just, like, I'll jump kind of on the Hawks or the Braves bandwagon when they're good and not pay attention at all when they're not.
Right.
And even when they're good, and I'm like, I think I've watched one Braves game this year, like, start to finish.
Right.
And I've had it on in the background, like, 30 times maybe, but, like, I'll like turn it off, like, towards the end of a close game even, and just like go to bed. Like, so it's just, I'm the wrong person to ask, I guess, because I'm just not, like, I'm not, like, obsessed with it. Or,
well, I think you are the right person to ask, because it sounds like you've had a healthy, your relationship to sports has developed in a mature and healthy way. Because back in the day, you used to read a ton about sports.
I did, and that's the funny part, because, like, I remember y'all used to joke, it was like, you're like, oh, you don't know how to pronounce anyone's name because you only read about it, you don't watch it, which was completely true, like 100%. Like, yeah. I would say, like, the amount of reading I did about sports was probably like 90% versus, like, watching it was like 10%. So it was like the only thing I was, like, watching was, like, football, like, really and truly, and everything else was, like, not really at all. I mean,
right.
So, I've watched, like, some big games, but I think I watched 0 games of the NBA Finals this year.
Oh, really? Didn't watch the NBA playoffs?
But I did watch some of the other playoff games, but, like, the actual NBA, like, the finals, right? Like,
yeah.
So I've watched, like, 0 baseball playoffs. I've watched, like, maybe 1 baseball playoff game, like, in the last 10 years. I mean, it's like, I just don't. Like, I've watched the World Cup, it's like there's some sporting events, like, get my attention and I'll, like, watch them a lot more, but I've never had the attention span to, like, sit through a whole sporting event and, like, watch it start to finish. It's
right.
Like, I guess Saints is, like, so integral to my childhood.
Yeah.
That it's like I'm invested in it in a way I can't really, like, describe. I feel like there's just, like, a lot of childhood, like, memories rolled up in that. They're like, I do really care about that, and, like, I'll read about it and watch, like, I get upset if I miss a game or anything.
Yeah.
But like, now it's Tech football. I guess I, like, replaced that with, like, LSU football, because that would have been the childhood equivalent. But I mean, now, like, growing up, like, all I watched was, like, Saints football and LSU football, like, start to finish, and that's what I, like, cared about and got, like, upset about for, like, win losses or anything, but nothing other than that. Like, I've never gotten, like, that happy or that sad over, like, any other sporting event.
Do you still read?
No.
You're the first person to introduce me to Bill Simmons. And I've never read, like, any of Simmons' stuff, but he's been, like, a huge inspiration for me from a podcast standpoint. I love that fucker's podcast. And, like,
it's funny because I told you his articles are so bad.
Are they? They're, like, they go on forever, right? Aren't they, like, super long?
He's just a horrible writer. So.
Really?
Yeah.
But you used to read his column regularly. I mean, didn't you used to like print them out at the tech library and, like, read them on the roof?
Yeah, it was sad. Like, I used to, like, he'd, like, print a new column, and I'd go and print it up in the library and then go, like, yeah, exactly, and, like, read it, like, later, or, like, in class, like, read the article or something. It was like, but yeah, he's a horrible writer.
He's a great podcast. I love his podcast. Seriously, he's a huge, like, inspiration for me doing my own podcast. I get so much enjoyment out of his. I guess for me, man, I guess my shit was a little deeper It was like a more integral part of my life and who I was. The Vikings is like my Saints, right? It feels like part of who I am. And like I think about this season, I'm like, I don't think I can. I just need to take a step back from all sports. I'm not going to follow them anymore. And then I think, well, it's easy to say that in June or July when the football season's that around, NFL season rolls around. Can I really envision myself not following the Vikings? But then I'm getting like, man, it's like, that seems unhealthy to have like that big of attachment to them. And then also, like, I remember entering college and wanting to be, like I said earlier, I wanted to be a professional athlete and thought I was going to be up until like 9th grade. And then after that, I entered college as a journalism major thinking like I'm going to be a sports writer. And then I got exposed to like broader topics of human existence and it seemed a little trivial. So I guess that was my first like step outside of the obsession. But even still to this day, like I was actually talking to my buddy Mike about this last night on the phone. And the way I've come to view sports now is like, I think there is a direct relationship between the amount of attention I'm devoting to sports and like my dissatisfaction with my current life circumstance. And so what the way I kind of view it now is I'm using my attention to sports as a barometer for like how I'm doing in my own life. So if I'm watching like I can never envision myself watching like I would when I was a kid, but like if I'm watching regular season NBA basketball, which I haven't done in years, then like I'm probably not pursuing like things that are more meaningful in my own life, and that should probably serve as a wake up call. Or even like this past year, where I was really dissatisfied with my job, I did not like my job. I was really uncertain about the relationship I was in. I was smoking too much weed, which was a coping mechanism for my dissatisfaction of the other areas of my life. But then right along with the weed smoking is the other drug addiction, I think, which is the sports. I'm watching like every single NFL game. I got like the NFL Game Pass. I'm watching all the games like in condensed version. The NBA playoffs come along and I'm watching like every round of the NBA playoffs. And then it really was a big wake up call, like school ended this year and NBA free agency started, and I'm like reading about like all of the latest signings in NBA free agency, and I knew like I was leaving my job. I knew I really wanted to start this podcast. I knew I was like kind of embarking on this new chapter in my life. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? This is just like old habit. So like it's this comfort zone where like I need a distraction from like the real world. I'm going to open the ESPN app and like go through the latest signings of NBA free agency. So anyway, I want to get your take on that because I really do feel like my relationship with sports is something that I'm trying to get a hold of and I need to view as like a drug. I'm going to use it in like social circumstances when that's like going on, but I don't need to be like, it doesn't need to be a part of my daily existence.
Yeah, I'm just like, not because I don't want to, but like I just can't like watch. Well, I guess I can. I mean, I do. But, like, when I sit there and I watch, like, on those, like, NFL Sundays when I, like, wake up and watch it, like, watch the pre-games and then, like, 1 to, like, at the end of the day, I'm like, I've been watching TV for, like, 8 hours today.
Dude.
Like, I feel like shit. Like, and it feels like I burned, like, a whole day of my life.
Dude, I hear you 1,000%. This past NFL season, man, I look back on it with, like, shame. Like every single NFL Sunday, there I was like huddled up in my tiny little like 1-bedroom apartment watching from 1 p.m. kickoff till like I fell asleep watching the Sunday night game. Like that's literally an entire day. That's 17 Sundays. Just like up in flames. By myself. It'd be one thing if I were doing it like a social context, like, out at a bar with friends or at someone's house. But anyway, all right. Wanted to end on that kind of more trivial note, but important to, it's been an important part of our relationship our entire lives, and I'm still kind of wrestling with how to deal with it.
It has. I was thinking about MLB The Show the other day because I was like, that had the sweetest of like any sports game when you'd hit a home run and the camera angle would change for a second. You're like, holy shit.
Yes. That's another thing, dude. Talk about wasted time. The amount of time, we didn't get into video games, but the amount of time, I only played sports video games, but the amount of time dedicated to playing MLB The Show, FIFA, Madden, any of that shit, man. Like, unbelievable. Hours upon hours. All right, brother. I appreciate you coming in here. I love you to death. You'll always be a brother to me, and I wanted you to be the first non-family member to be on this podcast, so thank you.
I'm glad to be here. I want to be like a recurring guest. I'd like to.
No, let's do it. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, we gotta like.
Eventually, like he came in here. You said off the top, like, "Oh, I thought you were gonna bring me in here to talk about current events." That's the plan. Like I've laid the foundation with like my family to begin with, to like kind of figure out who the fuck I am. And then now moving into like my closest friendships throughout life, and there's going to be about 7 of y'all, where I'm just kind of like laying the foundation of like, I don't know, a vision or a philosophy, just talk about things with people I know best. But yeah, once I get like all of these closest friends out of the way, that's what I want to do. I want to bring on, like Simmons does with like Joe House and Cousin Sal and all that shit, bring on like my friends and people whose opinions I respect to like just shoot the shit about the world.
Yeah, you should have like multiple people in the Chicago round table. That'd be funny as hell.
No, for sure. All right, man. Thank you, brother.
Yep.
2.5 hours.
Damn.